fascinating, don't you agree?
Oh, yes. Two vast computers so evenly matched they can't outthink one another.
You know how the stalemate can be broken, of course.
Oh, no.
Pull to open.
Pull to open!
Yes, and what do you do?
Penetration drilling into objective area is
Totally impotent!
Yes.
here! Come!
Hello and welcome to a very, very special episode of Pull to Open, the ongoing quest, the only ongoing quest on your podcast dial to go through all of the television show Doctor Who in extremely random order with a randomizer installed in our TARDIS. My name is Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal. Chris and I are a couple of guys who wander throughout time and space, but specifically time. We're always on time. I want everyone to know this, that we're always completely punctual at our proper place in time and space constantly because we have such a good sense of time.
That's right.
We're really like Time Lords ourselves. I really think we should put that on our LinkedIn profile. So keep that in mind, everyone.
I always, since we're going to be talking about Douglas Adams this episode, I'm going to tell you one of my favorite Douglas Adams quotes. It's from the Dirk Gently series where Dirk Gently is late for something and he bursts into a room and he realizes the best thing to say is, "Pray God I'm not too soon," but that he's going to have to come up with a really, really good excuse after that. I think about that a lot when I'm running 5 minutes late for things. But yes, time management, not always the best thing. We're recording here a little later than planned on Sunday, February 26th, and let us talk about where we have been on previous weeks, because it's been quite a trip. We were 3 episodes ago on Mars for the waters of Mars for what the Pull to Open listeners have decided is a 96% Viscount banger. Still quite amazed by those results. We started doing polls on these stories on Spotify, so Spotify audience loved Waters on Mars with David Tennant. 2 episodes ago, we zipped forward to Matt Smith, discovering dinosaurs on a spaceship, not a Viscount banger, and then last week, we rocketed back in time to Pertwee in jail with Unit and the Master and Joe and a creature in a vat with an eye that was sucking out all their evil impulses. It was the mind of evil. And then our randomizer actually, lo and behold, listened to us because I asked specifically to go back to my doctor, Tom Baker, and what did the randomizer do? It took us not just to my doctor, but to my first real story, my first real Doctor Who story in 1979, when I first became a true Doctor Who fan, was with this story. This is the dividing line for me. It's not that I hadn't watched it before, but this is it. This is the one that got me. It was certainly my first Dalek story. It is the controversial, not always highly regarded Terry Nation Douglas Adams joint known as Destiny of the Daleks.
And given your story there, for the first time, the title makes sense to me. It's like, yes, that's what this title was always leading towards. It's your destiny, Chris.
My destiny. No one ever knew whose destiny it was, but it was my destiny all along, which is entirely appropriate given, and we'll get to this, but I wrote my first piece of fanfic based on Destiny of the Daleks, in which I was invited by Doctor Who, as he was called in the fanfic because I was 5 years old, to climb inside the television and join him in this adventure and have a better adventure than the one we saw on screen. So it was actually my destiny to join.
Bar there. But anyway,
Indeed. But it was.
I could see Tom Baker's doctor recruiting kids on the other side of the screen.
Yeah,
with the Daleks here. Huh? Come on.
Yes, come on in, kids. Come on. Terry Nation doesn't know what he's doing anymore. Douglas Adams is messing everything up. Come on. It's all up to you. Yes, but it's a very special episode also for Pull to Open. Because we're back to the Fourth Doctor. That's one thing. We haven't been there since September of 2022 when we were here for Revenge of the Cybermen, which itself was Dalek related, following on from Genesis of the Daleks. And we have done Genesis of the Daleks before, of course. So this is it. Play the sound effect. We have got a Fourth Doctor Dalek bingo, everyone. This is it. No more Tom Baker plus Daleks.
Yeah. And again, someone correct us if we're wrong. I feel like I always have to say that because we always sort of seem to say things and assert them with such certainty, but we're sometimes not sure. No, this is it. Like there were only two main Dalek stories in Tom Baker. So there was Genesis and this one, Destiny. And they had a brief cameo in Logopolis. So if you really want to count that, that's also
we've done that too. Yeah,
we've done that too, and there are no other Dalek appearances. I think they are mentioned maybe once, maybe twice more, and I know one of them is in the Face of Evil when the Doctor just sort of casually says there's a dead piece of equipment and says it's dead as a Dalek. But that's like, if you're getting into dialogue, that's just silliness, right?
I like that. Dead as the Daleks were in the Baker era, which I hadn't really thought about how few Dalek stories there are.
Yeah, it's funny to look back then and compare it to New Who. And I was actually thinking a little bit about this. Why New Who just keeps doing the Daleks, and there's sort of the rumor that that's part of the contract. But there was a bit of a legendary status they kind of took on, being so removed from the classic series, right? And then when they were like we did Dalek, which was the first appearance of them in the new series, and they were just so formidable, so upgraded, so much more dramatic. The legend sort of became real, and then it was just too tempting to keep them to keep the showrunners to keep themselves from going back into that pool and just trying to keep generating drama and action, from the Daleks. Some might say to diminishing returns, but
I think you're absolutely right. But yeah, it is interesting that for the most casual of fans, Tom Baker's Doctor and the Daleks are probably two of the most iconic things about Doctor Who. I hadn't thought about the fact that they're so together so infrequently. Or that we would reach the end of it. We would see it no more on Pull to Open. But it's interesting that randomizers taken to say right after a Pertwee episode that has a Cyberman, because of course Pertwee didn't really encounter the Cybermen except very, very, very briefly. And we just did that. So we got the Pertwee Cyberman bingo. We have the Tom Baker Dalek bingo. And that's not even counting the Pull to Open bingo card that you may well have open in front of you. Thanks to one of our fans, Dad Josen One on Twitter. We're still playing that. I don't think this counts as a cheesy segue, so sorry you can't check off that part of the Pull to Open bingo card, but it is a nice slidey segue into the feedback loop.
And be patient, listeners. I'm sure there will be a cheesy segue to come later. But yes, we are in the feedback loop. And of course, the first thing we like to talk about in the feedback loop is reviews. Guys, if you're a subscriber of the program, you haven't left a review, please go into whatever app you're listening on. Usually it's the Apple Podcast app that allows for reviews. Leave us a review. It doesn't have to be long. It can be very quick. I don't think you even have to pause the playback. You can just go right in, quickly type out a review on your phone. Hey, good stuff. Hey, what's up? Hey, just hey. Hey is fine.
Just hey. Or just an emoji title is fine.
Or an emoji title, exactly. That doesn't take too many characters. You can think of the most basic thing, whether it's blinking. Is there a blinking emoji? If there isn't, there should be. But go ahead and leave that. I think I'll know what title that is. But various listeners sometimes leave us emoji titles if the reviews are a good place to leave them, but they also sometimes send them to us on Twitter. And we are, of course, on Twitter at Pull2Open63. Follow us there. And one of our fans, it is actually Bob Gibley, a longtime fan of the pod, friend of the pod, has left us a few emoji titles. He left us a bushel of them in one of the tweets. So we're going to paste them out here in our emoji title segment, which has me telling Chris what the emojis are, and he's going to guess the titles. Usually, guys, I have done my research, studied the emojis, checked the titles in the codex, and figured out what they are. Well, this first one has me a bit flummoxed, okay? So Chris, I'm kind of depending on you to sort of sort this out for me. I've got some suspicions on what it is, but I genuinely am not sure. So this is a long one, okay? All right. So we got 5 emojis.
Okay.
First emoji, number 4. Second emoji, the number 2.
42.
Third emoji, head down, looks like a female with blonde hair. So it's like the head on hands, kind of either the sort of worshiping or, bowing down, I guess.
Right.
And then there's the shuffle emoji, the 2 arrows that sort of cross over each other to the side. So they're both pointing to the right. And then there's the sort of kneel before, what is it? The head down emoji.
Right. The sort of the kowtowing. Yeah.
And it looks like a man with dark hair. Okay.
Okay. And that's it.
2, head down, female blonde, shuffle, head down, dark haired male.
Okay, so we've got 42, which is entirely appropriate for the first story with Douglas Adams as script editor that we've gone to. I don't think it's the New Who story 42, unless it is, unless they're doing
I don't think it's 42. Because then why wouldn't you just stop at 42?
Yeah. I mean, we do encourage our listeners to do a little flourish with, kind of describing the story. And I'm lost for my memory of what the story of 42 contains, but I don't think involves anyone bowing down or any randomness. So, 4-2. Is it the power of 3? Because 3 is between 4 and 2? Yeah. What is the randomness? Maybe.
It could be. Here's a couple ideas I had. I don't know if they work, but maybe they do. So 4 is in some titles, and so they have 4 to Doomsday.
Ooh, yes. Okay.
Is this that, though? Because what is the blonde woman and the dark-haired man and the shuffle?
4 to Doomsday better than I do.
Yeah, I mean, there's some robots that take on human form. It's just too much of a stretch, I think, to figure out these emojis, how they fit with that. So the other thing that's focusing on the first part. You can also focus on the second part where you have essentially blonde woman, shuffle, dark-haired guy. I mean, that sounds like Power of the Doctor. Like,
ooh, yes.
Seconds, right?
Yes, it could be. It could definitely be that.
And what's the 4 and the 2? Is it the doctors and the 2 companions? Like the class 4 classic doctors, 2 classic companions?
It could be. And the shuffle being the sort of the Master's Doctor Regeneration in that. But yeah, it's wow. I think this may be the first one that has stumped both of us.
Yeah, maybe.
So
we're not gonna we spend too much time with this, guys.
Yeah,
Bob. If you know, well, Bob knows, but
Bob knows. Bob could maybe give us a hint
on this one. I'm guessing Power of the Doctor. Are you guessing anything specific?
Oh God, what else did I say? I said Power of 3, which I don't think is true, but I'm just going to throw it in there as a possibility.
So Power 3 or Power of the Doctor.
We're feeling some power on this. Yes,
a little bit. All right. So if you guys have an idea of what this is, please go ahead and tweet at us or tweet at Bob, and we're going to move on to the next emoji title. And I think this one is going to be a little bit quicker. All right, Chris, you ready?
Yes.
All right. There is the triple Z emoji.
Okay. Sleeping.
And then you have the cross out symbol.
Sleep no more. Oh, so easy. Thank you, Bob, for doing an easy one as well as an impossibly difficult one.
Maybe that's the impossible girl.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean, maybe 42 means life, the universe, and everything, which might give us more of a clue. Is there anything is there an everything of the Daleks? No. All right, I'm going to keep. You know what? It's going to happen like 45 minutes into the show.
Yeah,
I'm sure of it. Just skip ahead, and we'll just shout out in the middle of some debate about Terry Nation. We'll just be like, "Oh, I know what it is." Yeah.
If you're skipping ahead, I think on Spotify you're going to have to tap that button about 100 times to get about halfway through the show. But if you are listening on Spotify, I would have some recommendations for you. Hey, you can rate the show on your mobile app. You can actually go in, give us as many stars as you care to leave. For some reason, I'm picturing the number 5, so go ahead, leave 5 stars if you're so inclined. Plus, you can rate our episodes as well. Every week, we are going to put out a poll to you, the listeners, to tell us what you think of the episode that we just talked about. And our rating system currently has 4 ratings. You can rate them a Dalek, an Ogron, a Professor Hater, a Viscount Banger. Fast forward to the end to find out what those mean if you're not sure. But you guys can rate them, and we will update you guys on what the results are. And I will do that now because we have the results for Dinosaurs in a Spaceship. And as expected, perhaps, there are 0% of people who think it's a Viscount Banger.
Oh, Rory's dad didn't vote, evidently.
33% call it a Dalek, but half called it a Professor Hater, which is, of course, an example of how not to do Doctor Who or not a great episode, and you learn something about Doctor Who. And then 17% called it an Ogron, which, of course, is just plain bad.
Well, we gave this one a Professor Hater, right? Did we? Did we both do that?
We both did. Oh God, now I can't remember. I did haven't updated the codex, but we definitely didn't give it a Dalek.
Yeah,
an Ogron. Let me actually call up my old notes. But yeah, I think this mirrors. I'm not sure if we're influencing the fans. I'm surprised. Well, not that surprised, but like 33% Dalek. I could see definitely the fond memories, particularly for Fran.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite a good episode, a Dalek. It's not the best of the best, but it's quite good. And yeah, I had a surprising amount of fun rewatching Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. So even though I may have rated it a Professor Hater, we're just finding out now, but I think, you know, we are softening on what our Professor Hater means. So it doesn't mean that I don't have good feelings about it. So I can understand the Dalek vote.
You also didn't leave your rating in the notes, so we're going to have to check that out. But I did give this one an Ogron, and I think it was because of all the things that did not come together. It was just kind of a mess.
I'm pretty sure mine was a Professor Hater. I haven't given any Ogrons lately. So, yeah, pretty sure that's what that was. Oh, yeah, and last week I do, with the Mind of Evil, I gave that a Professor Hater. And I do remember saying that I didn't want necessarily to go for 2 haters in a row. So, yes, that was my vote. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for voting along with me. I appreciate your 50% support. Not quite as good as the 96% support Pete got last time for the Waters of Mars rating, but I feel like I believe this result more.
All right. Well, waiting. Big points for fan believability this time. And note to self to update the codex right after this. All right. Guys, don't forget to also follow us on YouTube, where we're having a big push this year. We've got all our episodes. Every single Pull to Open episode is now on YouTube for you to binge watch or binge listen. It is at youtube.com/Pull to Open. Of course, all of our short videos are there. We've got well over 600 subscribers there. Really want to get to 1,000 in the next few months. I think we can do it by summer. Let's do it. So if you subscribe to the podcast in audio form, please also subscribe on video form on the YouTubes. All right. Good discussion still happening on YouTube, of course. A lot of good comments. And we also still getting great comments on TikTok, where we're still doing lives every Sunday before we tape. We managed to have a quick look around my room a little bit before this one and see all sort of the Dalek stuff in the background. If you're looking
Yes.
on YouTube, seeing all my Dalek Easter eggs for, of course, the Destiny that we're about to talk about. But our great listeners on TikTok was really enjoying our various videos on dinosaurs in the spaceship. And a lot of people resonated with the one about Brian.
Yeah.
Sort of the highlight.
Brian and his trowel.
Brian, of course, being Rory's dad, and Dinosaurs in the Spaceship was his first appearance. And yeah, he was, doing some stuff. He was piloting ships with Rory. The trowel was a big highlight.
He had a trowel in his pocket. Yep. Mm-hmm.
At the end, he's chowing down on his lunch there while sort of looking down on the world from the front door of the TARDIS, which is pretty cool.
That's right, sipping tea.
So a couple of commenters highlighted something that I completely forgot. And I think the first one to do it was Katie Lee 422 on TikTok. And she mentions that River had a sonic trowel.
She did.
Is it a family heirloom? Because, of course, Brian's her grandfather, right?
Yeah, which is hard to think about sometimes. You have to remind yourself that River is part of the Williams family as well as the Pond family. So, yeah, Brian is granddad. It could be a family heirloom, and it's definitely after that because we discover her sonic trowel in the Husbands of River song.
Mm-hmm,
yes, right. Capaldi episode, definitely after Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, but also in the Moffat era. So I can imagine Moffat pulling that out as a Easter egg kind of thing, a little nod to the Rivers and to the Ponds and the Williamses. Yeah, and certainly, wherever Granddad is at that point, I'm sure he's proud of River for pulling that one out. So yeah. Good on her.
And I'm also a little bit like, he was on Siluria, right? So
yes.
Maybe that's like a thing you could pick up in the gift shop there. So, the museums, when you have dinosaur museums, you're like, oh yeah, you can just get the things the archaeologists use to dig up.
Yes.
Stuff. So there you go.
Yeah, or maybe it's super timey-wimey and it was actually River's in the first place, then Brian picks it up, then he gives it back to River, and it just creates a loop, a time loop. There we go, Big Finish. This is the spin-off nobody asked for, the Sonic Trowel spin-off. Let's enough of these following characters that we see on screen, let's follow a device.
The bootstrapped Sonic Trowel.
Google it.
Box set.
Google it.
All right. Guys, closing out the feedback loop, please follow us also on Twitter, already mentioned, Pull to Open 63, but Instagram as well. Also Pull to Open 63, where we're always sharing videos, photos, and always welcome more comments. So ordinarily, this is the bit where there's probably some other business because Doctor Who's the thing being made right now, and there's conventions like Gallifrey 1 that just happened and lots of stuff, but really...
Yeah.
No, there isn't.
No.
Happening.
No, let's get into it.
Business.
I am so ready to plunge into Destiny of the Daleks. You had no idea. I've been sitting here regenerating for the last 20 minutes into slightly different forms. You probably can't tell. But yeah, I'm so ready to talk. There's so much to get into here that we have to do it. We have to start with the thing we always start with, which is TLDW, Too Long Didn't Watch, or Too Long Doctor Who, or Too Long Ago. Too long ago, don't worry.
Sure.
And yeah, well, let's do that. But anyway, one of us will describe the plot in record time. We assign 30 seconds per Classic Who episode, 1 minute per New Who episode. This is 4 classic episodes in Destiny of the Daleks. And that means that it is 2 minutes. You, Pete Patchell, have 2 minutes to describe. It is your turn. Destiny of the Daleks. Right. Are you ready, sir? Are your tabs closed? Is your mind clean?
All gone.
Yes.
The mind probe has completely erased it. Didn't get out of there in time. Didn't get stasered like the Castellan. No, the mind probe got me. Yeah, all the tabs are gone. No notes. All from memory.
Yep, you feeling confident?
I'm going to sort of tap into how, obviously the memory of watching it last week, but also having thought about it and how it sort of fits into Dalek canon for decades. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. This is the danger of rabbit holes is high, I must say, but
there is the danger of knowing it too well, as we found out with the Doctor playing checkers last week. Sometimes it can appear too simple, and fine minds like ours or the Doctor's can get tripped up by that. So you have 2 minutes for the official pull to open summary of Destiny of the Daleks in 3, 2, 1, go.
So the Doctor's looking at K9. He's broken. He's got laryngitis. Romana regenerates in the TARDIS for seemingly no reason, but decides to on the form of Princess Astra. They go out. They land on a planet. They don't know where they are, but they quickly realize after they see a bunch of people put a body and buried in rubble, and they check out some ruins and the high radiation, that this is actually Scaro. But unfortunately, the Doctor and Romana got separated. The Doctor is taken prisoner by these weird disco-looking guys that have landed on the planet in their ship, whereas Ramana is taken prisoner by the Daleks, who actually don't live there anymore, but there's an expedition there digging for something. The Doctor knows what it is, or suspects what it is, and finds out, yes, in fact, they are looking for Davros, their creator, who has been sitting underneath the rubble of their city for eons, it seems, but is still somehow alive. And the Doctor gets to him first because he knows the city and he knows the shaft that goes down to where it is, where Davros is, and he tries to negotiate with the Daleks and tell them to release all the prisoners while the Daleks start killing them to try to get him to release Davros. So the Doctor escapes sort of through a passage. The Daleks recover Davros, but their ship is 6 hours away. So what they need to do, because the Doctor and Romana and the remaining slaves who have been freed sort of ally themselves with the Movellans, who are these guys who landed, and they're going to try to get Davros in
90 seconds.
But they realize that the Movellans are just as bad. They're another race of sort of robotic creatures, and they're at war with the Daleks, but there's not a single shot fired. They basically need someone to change their battle computers, and the Daleks want to use Davros, the Movellans want to use the Doctor, but the Doctor tricks the Davros into destroying all these Daleks because he was going to blow up the Movellan ship with them, and then the Davros gets taken prisoner by the humans who have overpowered the Movellans, and he's frozen in cryogenics. They go off, and the Doctor want to go back to the TARDIS and leave.
Wow! Yes, I'm going to say we're going to wait for the photo finish there, but I think you crossed the line just in time, in 2 minutes flat, and really good. I was a bit worried about where you included a corridor at one point. You were like, the Doctor escapes in a passage of some sort. Like, yes, that is definitely, that's TLDW. The shaft, yes. It's TLDW filler, basically. We can just sort of assume that there's going to be a corridor, a shaft, a something in every single story. So, yeah.
For every TLDW, we should just say corridors running.
Yeah, exactly. If you can't remember where you are, just throw that out there.
For this one, it would be corridors running quarry.
Yes, it is so a quarry. It is. Oh wow, yeah. I mean, okay, we'll get into my excessive nostalgia for this story shortly. I don't want to splurge it all now. But it is definitely one of the stories that made my parents kind of always tell the quarry joke. It was like they were always looking out for quarries in Doctor Who. And every time we'd see a quarry, we were on holiday, we're like, oh, this is a great Doctor Who episode. Like it cemented, as it were, very appropriately, since cement is mentioned in this story, it cemented the association, at least in our minds, perhaps in a lot of people's minds, because this was a very, very well watched episode of Doctor Who. Just to say that it started season 17, the one after the Key to Time series, the first series season with the randomizer in charge. So we know why the randomizer's taken us here. He likes a story where the randomizer is largest in charge and has hit the shuffle button and Scaro has come up. the banger on the playlist, as it were. not necessarily a Viscount banger. But yeah, it was especially well watched in the UK in 1979 because ITV was on strike. So you
interesting.
literally could either watch this or opera. That was it. There was no Channel 4. There was no ITV. It was on strike. It was
cable, right? I mean, it was like,
Yep.
it's all broadcast.
You had for this on, between the 1st and 22nd of September 1979, you basically, or at least for the first episode, you basically had the choice of Doctor Who and Destiny of the Daleks on BBC One or Opera from Vienna on BBC Two for 6 hours.
Well, first of all, I'll say your family has all the makings of first-class navvies. I'll just say that for all their quarry and cement knowledge.
I'm sure they thought that I was going to go into the quarry business after watching all of this Doctor Who, but no.
Yeah, it was interesting to do the research for this one and see just how highly rated, particularly the last 2 episodes were. It broke records, like
14 million. 14 million.
Oh yeah, like
people
the
watching.
3rd episode broke records to 13 million, and then the next one was even more. It was just crazy. Which to me, I think signals like a testament to Davros himself. I think there was probably some word of mouth about certainly the Daleks are always a popular thing to bring back, and then when there's the big Davros reveal at the end of episode 2, I think the word of mouth probably just spread. It's like, oh man, there's Daleks and there's Davros. I remember that one from 5 years ago where it was Davros. Davros is back.
That's the thing. We're going back into a different era here where you just didn't necessarily have a lot of sequels. Certainly not in Doctor Who, and certainly it was a rare thing when it happened, and the return of Davros. I mean, and some of us, like me, I had not seen Genesis of the Daleks. I was too young for that. I was barely alive when it was on, and so this was my first encounter with Davros. But I definitely, got the sense he was a returning villain even at 5 years old. I knew that. And that notion of him returning. I mean, a lot of people like to sort of look back, and it's so easy for us now to see both of Tom Baker's Dalek stories and judge them against each other. But that's not how we would do it at the time. Like, yes, this is an inferior Davros. Yes, the mask didn't fit. Yes, you can see poor David Goodison. He's caught so much crap about this Davros over the years. But he, yes, he was pedaling along in his little Davros chair bike control. But so what? It was still scary. It was still moody. It was still lots of Dalek control room noise, which it's interesting. I've listened to so much of our own show. I did not immediately identify as the Dalek control room noise. I identified it as the noise that we used for the feedback loop. It's like, oh.
No, it's previously. It's for previously.
Previously. Yes, that's right. I sort of had that kind of Pavlovian reaction there. Like, oh.
I've always loved the Dalek beat, I got to say. And it's not so much it's like a good tune or anything. It's just a beat. But it is like, I love that it's been there, I believe, since the beginning. To my knowledge, I think it's been around since at least Dalek Invasion of Earth, perhaps the Daleks as well. And that beat, it's just like this consistent thing. Almost every Dalek episode, they bring it back, and it was one of the things that I love the sort of slow reveal in the new series to a certain extent, because you only have one Dalek in Dalek. There's no Dalek control base, but then the first time you see a Dalek ship in the Parting of the Ways, like sure enough, in the background noise is dun 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 dun, and it's just this atmospheric thing, and it's such a cool moment in episode 2 of Destiny here, where, and it's honestly, in my view, one of the best scenes with the Daleks in it is when Ramana's being interrogated, and they cut to the control room, and you see the Dalek sort of advancing on her with her hands on the little globes, and she's up against the wall, and you just hear it, doom, 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 doom. It's like, oh man, she's in trouble now. It's like,
cool. One positive thing that anyone can say about Destiny of the Daleks is that there's not a lot of music in it. It's almost all atmospheric sound effects, which is actually pretty good, and especially coming here from Mind of Evil, which, as we said, was one of those Pertwee episodes where they're like, we got a synthesizer and we're going to use it really obnoxiously in just about every scene. No, there's none of that. It's almost all atmosphere, allowing you to sort of hear the dialogue that the Doctor and Romana have got going on, because it's a very snappy, like there's whatever else you say about this story, it definitely reveals the Doctor and Romana 2's chemistry, which was very definitely based on behind the scenes chemistry, because yes, we know that Tom Baker and Lalla Ward ended up together, but I did not know until we researched this that they were totally doing it. At this point, they had in fact been totally doing it from Armageddon Factor, was it, where Princess
correct,
Astra appears? And that it was, I mean, Lalla Waters said this in interviews, like, there was sort of this cover story that he was like, oh, we need someone like her, and that sent the casting people to sort of replace Mary Tam with Lalla Ward. No, she's been quite open about it. Lalla Ward has, like, no, we just sort of schemed to get me in the show. Like, yeah, we were, we were totally an item, and we were like, let's just, keep this going by filming some Doctor Who together. And it was actually a good choice. They actually, often you have these couples who don't have on-screen chemistry,
right?
But they really have it here, and just the zippy dialogue between the two of them. Romana is really showing that she can be the Doctor's equal in terms of quips, a whole thing about stopping one of her hearts, and then Tissan says, I think says to her, you had two hearts. She says, yeah, one for casual, one for best. Like, Lalla Ward just tosses off those lines like it's nothing. She's great, and she really is kind of a almost a female Doctor in this story, especially with the iconic new outfit.
I'd almost tempted to say they go too far with it, but they don't really. I mean, this is, I'm glad we're starting off with some good positive things to say about this episode. And you nailed it. I mean, the best thing about it is probably this reboot of the Doctor and Romana. And I really I like Mary Tam as well. I think that works for the key to time, but it's different. It's very much like Mary Tam. She has some good lines and good situational stuff. But I mean, the point of Romana 1 is to contrast the Doctor's experience and street smarts with her book smarts, right? And so that's fine for a while. But after a while, it just doesn't work within the story. And it also gets repetitive because, Romana's going to get more experienced. And it doesn't, it just gets repetitive for the viewer, right? So, like, give us something fresh. So here they kind of are able to not just sort of reboot, but reboot and upgrade in a believable way, because it's hard to get a companion just sort of situationally who can be the Doctor's equal, but we already have a Time Lord or a Time Lady, if you will, in the TARDIS. You just need to recast and rewrite a little bit, and you're going along with it. And I got to say, I don't know, I've written my research on this on the costume. I'm not sure if it was Lalla Ward's idea or the costume designer's idea, but great idea. Like, to have it modeled after the Doctor's outfit, but very sort of noticeably different with the colors and style. And it really works for her. I mean, it's just
that pink coat, that wife scarf, that was absolutely iconic. On Baker's side, I believe this is the second of the of his three sort of outfit changes. Like, it's a much more piratical kind of version of this iconic scarf and hat, but it just looks like you put the two of them together with the TARDIS and K9 in those outfits, job done. People are going to watch. Like, this is one of those, like, iconic for the entire nation kind of outfits. So I do sense a discussion about Romana's Regenerations Hoving interview, because we cannot obviously discuss it without that. But before we do that, I feel like we should set the stage, because even I didn't know before I came to this research. Like, I knew that Douglas Adams was involved at this point. I knew that he was a script editor. I did not know that he basically wrote all of this from a Terry Nation, basically just outline of a story. Terry Nation, of course, famous for kind of phoning it in, creating the Daleks in the 60s, phoning it in the 70s. And he certainly does that here. This is Terry Nation's last official story for Doctor Who. And it's not even really that, because it's barely him. Like, he hated a lot of what ended up on the screen via Douglas Adams.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah.
I mean, it makes you wonder a little bit, like, how much Genesis was sort of filled in. I mean, it looks like he really tried with Genesis and didn't try so much here. I mean, at this point, I'm not sure when Blake 7 started, but he's
Before
doing
that,
Blake
yeah.
7. Yeah, but it was between Genesis and Destiny, right?
Yes, yes.
So in other words, like he's always had a bit of a fraught relationship with Doctor Who because he wanted to do the Daleks on their own or use them in other properties. I think there was even some discussion of him using them on Blake 7 right before this.
Yeah, there was. And by the way, Blake 7 started in 1978. So yes, we are fully in the thick of it here.
Yeah, so it's kind of like he has this. He owned the Daleks, but like as I've said before, the Daleks are totally useless without Doctor Who. So it's kind of like he was in this frustrating place of having this very valuable property, but it was really only valuable in one place. And again, he was obviously trying to be a smart businessman about it. He was doing other things, and probably getting older in his career too, thinking, I don't know, he's consciously thinking he could just coast, but I do feel like he probably was like, well, I'll just give them some stuff and they can do whatever they want with it.
Right.
And not really that married to the work itself, and Douglas Adams, stepped up to fill in the gaps as the new script editor, which again, that's his job. But it is like, I think he's kind of figuring out what he wants to do with Doctor Who here. And there's the tonally, I wouldn't say it's bad at all. It's just, what is on paper in terms of the outline of the story, the structure of it, and what comes out in terms of the script. I think a lot of the problems here come out. It's just a weird tasting combination because it's like the lines are very humorous. There's humorous situations, but there's also like we're supposed to take the Daleks seriously even when the script doesn't.
Yeah, we are, and it's just such a weird combination. Definitely not a thing you'd have today. We talked a lot about RTD and Moffat sort of being the Beatles of Doctor Who, right? They when they work together, like they cancel out a lot of each other's worst tendencies, and some when they work together, we get absolute bangers like Silence in the Library, like Blink. That is some of the best of Doctor Who has been them working together. I would love an alternate timeline where Terry Nation and Douglas Adams are kind of like different writers, and they're not so sort of bullheaded as they both were, and could actually work together, because I think the sort of the dark post-apocalyptic atmosphere that Terry Nation is always going for, not just in this, but in his show Survivors, he really loved that post-apocalyptic thing. He definitely wanted to warn us all about it. And with Douglas Adams' more lighthearted sensibility, like that could have balanced out very nicely. And if Terry Nation had more association with Doctor Who and interest in Doctor Who, I think he might have helped cancel out some of the more comedic elements that Douglas Adams gets into here. But let's get into that, because I'm a huge Douglas Adams fan. He's one of my heroes. I got to interview him in 2001 before he died. That was one of
before he died.
Yes, yeah, it was. It was like a few months before. It was very sad. I was interviewing about the Palm 7, if you remember that, and about his plans for H2G2. On new devices like the smart Palm 7. I don't think we were using the word smartphone yet, but like how Hitchhiker's Guide like that was. Right. So I know all about his life and career and like how this slots in. It's kind of weird. So he was 1978, his career takes off. He is simultaneously, given the script editor role on Doctor Who, based largely on the Pirate Planet. It just he just happened to be like he was a kid from Cambridge, just sort of came down, started working for Graham Chapman and the Pythons. Graham Chapman was getting a little too drunk at the time, and they couldn't really do good work, so he starts looking around for other stuff to do. He'd always been interested in science fiction, so and he actually did Doctor Who stories at school as a kid. Like he too did Doctor Who fanfic.
Not like yourself, yeah.
Indeed, and mine based on this. So the circle is complete. But he comes along, and obviously Pirate Planet's kind of a bit more of a comedy version. He is simultaneously writing Hitchhiker's Guide. Like that. This is all of the stuff that we think about when we think Hitchhiker's Guide, Restaurant at the End of the Universe, the number 42, Deep Thought and Life, the Universe, and everything. All of that stuff, Destruction of Earth by the Vogons, all of that comes in the same era that he is script editing Doctor Who, he's about to start script editing it. Like he's pulled in so many directions at once, and he's clearly got the fire. That sort of Promethean fire of creativity is flowing through his fingers, and he is. What is he doing? He's sort of investigating every single science fiction trope and turning it around, stretching it out, pulling it and shaking it and getting the comedy out of it, which is very much the style of Hitchhikers. And so it's sort of not surprising that he would do that with Doctor Who as well,
Right.
without sort of necessarily the respect for canon that we would have today,
And I feel like they're probably giving him, and I'm thinking of Tom Baker here specifically, like more leeway on his first story as script editor than he probably should have gotten, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what Tom Baker ultimately thinks of Douglas Adams, but my sense is from this story, like he was loving it. Like
Yeah.
the lines that hit, the humorous ones Baker is there at the top of his game to deliver them. Like even just that first bit, like, oh look, rocks. Like it's such a Douglas Adams bit. I mean, there's all this stuff, like later on, I feel like Davros is the straight man to the Doctor's comedy, and they're this comedy duo, and he's like offering him jelly babies, and Davros is slapping them away. I mean, that's such a great moment. I mean, it's there's these funny little visual gags, and with the book, and he's got the beginning of the universe. That was a little forced, I'll admit, but like the guy got it wrong on the first line. That was like, okay, dude. But I mean, I think this again, sticking with some of the positive stuff, I think Tom Baker is doing an amazing job here, probably because he's super into the role at this point. Like he's 6 years old. This is like his 6th season. He obviously knows what he's doing. And he's got this new relationship with Lala Ward, got her on the show. He's getting fed the best lines. He's
by the hottest young scriptwriter in Britain is writing his lines, and he must feel great, which is sort of weird because Baker, of course, would famously kind of berate anyone on set who didn't take this seriously. And like, he was like, there are kids out there, they take it super seriously. We've got to be totally into this. Like, even if it's wobbly and the Daleks are falling to pieces, whatever, just let's really do it like it's real.
Yeah, sell it.
Which is not what Douglas Adams is doing here. Like, he's walked over the comedy line, and this does, my first note on Destiny of the Daleks is, it's the story that tackles the question, how much comedy in Doctor Who is too much comedy? And this is it. This is over the line.
Right.
K9 with laryngitis, too much comedy. The multiple regenerations, too much comedy. Romana casually stopping her heart. The taunting of the Daleks. This is something Terry Nation painted. Taunting of the Daleks for not being able to get up the shaft.
Rightfully hated, I'll say.
Yes.
Nation's
here. He is. And this is very much Douglas Adams, the clever undergraduate, being a bit too clever. I've sort of made a note here comparing it to a clever kid in a school play who's like ad-libbing lines that's just like tearing down the fourth wall, pointing out that the sets are cheap and the villains aren't scary. Right. And he's kind of, you couldn't do this today. It's definitely a sign of how far Doctor Who has come and how far the world has come and the culture has come, that, you definitely couldn't do this now, but you could in 1979 when the show was just a mere 16 years old. It could be a bit kind of anarchic, and you could play around with canon and give Ramana multiple regenerations,
Right.
But let's zero in on that, because we got to handle the Ramana regenerations. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't even know that this was affecting. I was just like, it's just like a fever dream or a comedy sketch or something. And like, you're watching it as a kid, like, what is going on? Like, Ramana, multiple versions of her. What? She's tall now. She's an opera singer now. It definitely kind of almost walks up to the line of sexuality that Doctor Who never really crossed.
Yeah, well, especially when the opera singer type woman comes out, and she's got this sort of bikini top, it looks like. And, it's just and again, it's kind of breaking the fourth wall, where Tom Baker's like, no, thank you.
No, thank you. Not today.
You walked into Doctor Who. That's not this show. It's basically kind of what he's saying. It's this weird comedy bit to make something of getting Lala Ward as Ramana and trying to sort of explain it away in a way that's a little bit interesting, which it kind of does. But now we have to reconcile this with what we know about regeneration, right? And so here's the thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's like essentially like a controlled regeneration,
Yes.
like she's not regenerating because of intense bodily harm or something. Like she's basically doing this thing where she picks out her body. And there's some precedent for this, believe it or not. So if you look at the war games, like the end of the war games, when the Time Lords talk about like, hey, you go ahead and pick your appearance, and they show them these terrible drawings, which
Yes.
was the absolute worst. And then Troughton's like, no. But there's a point where he says, I do have the right to determine what I look like. He actually asserts it as a right. And it makes, if you think about this, and if you want to sort of throw some headcanon at this, well, maybe when most Time Lord regenerations are more like this one, this Romana regeneration, where you just kind of, there's sort of a limit to how far you want typically go with the body. You regenerate, and then but you pick your body. And maybe even in this sort of early phase of the regeneration, if it's planned, you can kind of do it in this sort of casual way where you can actually look at your body on yourself the same way we try on clothes at Macy's or whatever, and just look at it in the mirror and then just settle on one once you've activated the energy. Whereas in the Doctor's case, and most of the regenerations that we've seen, not just the Doctor's on screen, are like emergency regenerations. There's severe bodily harm involved. So there, maybe these that we've seen are more the exception in Time Lord society, where if it's an emergency and this has happened to you, then there isn't a selection process. You just have to go with whatever the dice roll is. And that's kind of how I'm sort of explaining this in my head.
I like that. Yeah, you're right about the war games. I was just thinking about the fact that we have, let's say you're a Doctor Who fan in 1979. What have you seen on screen up till this point? Only 2 regenerations.
Right.
One of them, obviously, 10th Planet, Power of the Daleks. We've dealt with both sides of that. Just a very simple fade to white face change. Really, the only real regeneration we've seen is Pertwee to Baker, in which the Brigadier, the hipster, says, "Here we go again," like he's seen one before.
Although technically, you could say in Planet of Spiders, there's another regeneration you witness where Kanpo regenerates into the Chochi, right?
Yes.
Anyway,
we'll haven't seen it yet, but we'll get there. But yeah, again, so we've seen sort of different, and this is definitely perhaps Romana is more of a war game style, which is interesting because there has been so much discussion over this over the years. People have looked back from the Christmas invasion, the way that Doctor was able to grow a new hand in that, say that in your early part of your regeneration, you're particularly malleable. Or maybe she is issuing a projection of what she could look like it's some sort of holographic thing. Right. There's a short story with something. It's called something like "The Witch in the Wardrobe," where the TARDIS is jealous of her, Romana, locks her in a cupboard, and the Destiny of the Daleks Romana is not actually Romana. It's just a TARDIS projection, which is that. You have to explain so much there. That doesn't sound great.
Bold
idea. But yeah, ultimately we have to just see it like you can canon this to death, and you have to just see it as it was Douglas Adams doing a joke, and the joke is ultimately at the Doctor's expense because the Doctor only accepts the version of Romana that is wearing his costume. So it's sort of the joke is the Doctor as an egoist.
And then, of course, she sort of ends up in a version of his costume. So
yeah.
And he gets to make a joke, get out of those ridiculous clothes, so...
Yeah, and it's sort of a joke, like you can change your body as easily as you change your clothes, and it's tailoring, like I'll have the arms taken in or whatever. So yeah, you get the joke. However you want to headcanon it, just remember that that's not what anyone was doing at the time. It was sort of just okay. This was a malleable show at the time, and it was not sort of rigidly defined. But yeah, it is definitely a little half-off point to discuss regeneration. I will just bring it up once again. May have discussed this once or twice. This notion that the Doctor's regenerations change after the Sisterhood of Khan, after he turns from Paul McGann to John Hurt. Right. That's when you get the fire in the regenerations. That's when the Doctor starts to lose his no claims bonus on his TARDIS insurance by messing up the TARDIS with the pillars of fire every time. So regeneration itself can change. There are different forms of it. We haven't seen it all. We've definitely seen a clue in Hell Bent, somewhere else we've been, that it is different for Time Lord women, and the sort of the man flu that the Doctor gets from Castrovalva onwards. Again, a change from Castrovalva onwards. Is not necessarily the norm. And it might sort of account for why he's holding on to his William Hartnell body for so long, because he's a bit of an egoist there. And I just like the idea that the Doctor is kind of partly shunned from polite Time Lord society because he has such a problem with regeneration. Like he can't just choose his new face too easily.
He's constantly taking naps after. He regenerates and he's just in bed, or he's in a zero cabinet, or it's just like, you just kind of, you change your body and you're back in the party 5 minutes later. I mean, that's how it's usually done, I guess.
I love the idea that like somewhere in the TARDIS, there's just an unopened bottle of pills that the Doctor was prescribed for his regeneration problems.
Oh, hey, speaking of pills.
Yes, radiation.
Talk a little bit about this. So it's funny, like there's a lot of firsts and lasts for this episode. And it's like, I believe the last episode to refer to the Scaro is basically a radiation torn wasteland, even though it's kind of clearly like a wasteland of some kind in subsequent episodes it's seen. The radiation on Scaro has always been an issue.
Yeah.
We see it an issue in the Daleks. It's an issue in Genesis of the Daleks, and it's an issue here until it isn't. Basically, about 2 episodes in, they basically just forget about the radiation. They never explain how the slaves can be there for so long. I don't know if they're there that long. I mean, it's funny, like Tyson, who is the slave that they sort of befriend. I was calling him Orange Rope Guy at the beginning. He had this orange rope around his shoulder for no reason. But he says he's a slave of the Dalek for 2 years at some point. And they've been mining here for 2 years, I kind of thought, but maybe he means he's been in like a Dalek slave ship or slave colony, because they sort of mention one at some point. But I'm just like, that's a pretty long life expectancy as a Dalek slave, I gotta say, like, especially since they don't really seem to properly feed their slaves that well, or care about their well-being in the slightest, which is certainly in keeping with what Dalek society would be. But I imagine after this episode, because he survives, he goes on to write some epic novella or whatever, like 2 years a Dalek slave. And a sensation in the 40th century or whenever this is. But
wow.
Anyway,
the book that led directly to the Time War. People realized the Daleks have to be stopped, and the Gallifreyans stepped in. The radiation thing is weird. Just to catch everyone up, we haven't seen it recently. So, the Doctor sets a timer for him and Ramana to take their radiation pills, and then it's just sort of forgotten.
Well, then he hoards all the pills. What?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, why not give Ramana some? Also, he says it goes off at one point, and when he's buried, and he's like, I got to remember to give Ramana her pills. And he never does, unless it happens off screen. And then again, it's all forgotten about. I mean, they sort of imply that the prisoners are dying of radiation sickness. But I mean, again, how long have they been there? It seems like the Daleks have been there a while, trying to mine this thing. Maybe not. I don't know. It's very unclear, because the Daleks like bust out of their own mine or their own shaft or their own. I mean, it's such a weird cliffhanger to episode 1. And were you thrown, by the way, just to sort of quickly transition, the studio lights?
Yes,
they're so clearly in the shot. Like, I mean, it really takes you out. Like, there's zero attempt whatsoever. Like, there's literally
no attempt to dress them up.
Not on the side. It's not like there's a scene where it's like literally in front of Mary Tam's face, or sorry, Lalla Ward's face.
Yes,
and you're just wait a minute, like, who put those lights there? Are we meant as viewers to think that, or was it literally a mistake? Because it's a pretty huge mistake.
It's all staged. It's all staged. The conspiracy theorists are going to have a fine one with this. That it was clearly supposed that, like, the Doctor and the Daleks are in cahoots. It was all set up. It was all I don't know where I'm going with that, but I will say, just while we're on the subject of the prisoners and radiation poisoning, that perhaps no one including the Daleks, cares less about the prisoners' welfare than the prisoners themselves, because these are sort of renowned as some of the most just basic extras, worst extras in Doctor Who history. When they get exterminated, they fall over without like even trying to chew a little bit of the scenery. It just like that. There's nothing in their desks. It's just like, oh.
And I could kind of understand the first one, kind of like, okay, I'll get up and stand here. What are you going to do? And then to get zapped. The second one, though, like wouldn't the second one, I'm there's a door over there. Maybe I can make it. Like, are you really just going to stand there? Like, you're going to just get shot. Like, come on.
Right, and none of them talk. None of them have a speaking role except Tyson. He's nominated to speak for all the prisoners.
There's the two prisoners who talk to Ramana as she's
in episode 1.
Yeah, I remember this because one of them is played by an actor. They have some lines too.
Yeah, David Yip, who became the Chinese detective. Yeah, very recognizable face on British TV.
Yeah, he was in the making of documentary of this. And he gets a couple lines. I think he talks about the ship, and so there's a little bit of color there. But again, like, you also sort of get the sense, and again, it's Doctor Who, so you could give it a wide leeway for this. They're working in what looks like a mine, just clearing rocks, whereas most of the Dalek scenes are in a shaft or like a base, like it's the city, right? And if you're looking for Davros, as that's the point, like, why are you wasting time moving rocks around in this quarry just outside? Like, it's I know you're limited by your sets and your location and what you're going to do, but it just like, it's one of those scenes where the visuals are just so incongruent that you're just like, wait a minute, what are they even doing here?
Well, unions are very powerful in Britain in the 70s, so I'm sure a lot of people just thought, oh, well, it's just prisoner union. Like, they're just being given busy work. They just have to have a certain amount of hours per day, and like that's clearly what's going on here. But speaking of color, speaking of David Yip and Chinese detective and all of that, this has to be, I mean, well, again, we're in the vein of saying nice things about Destiny of the Daleks. This is kind of years ahead of its time in terms of how diverse the cast of extras is. Like, the Movellans are almost all people of color, which is interesting. Not
women.
Yes, or women, and it's not even mentioned. It's just sort of a thing, which is sort of what it makes it so kind of disappointing when it's revealed. Spoiler alert: that the Movellans are also robots. But yeah, that's kind of a thing with it. Like, if you just treat Destiny of the Daleks visually, it's a very interesting piece of Doctor Who. It just sort of, one fascinating visual bleeding into another. But that fourth wall breaking with the lighting positioned perfectly with the Daleks are going to break out. It just, there's a lot of fourth wall breaking in this, and that was definitely of a piece with the script.
Yeah. I would say visually, like, we make fun of Doctor Who quarries. These are they're some of the better quarries, I got to say. Like, there is some interesting rocks, certainly in that. I think it's a quarry they found on the coastline.
Yes.
I think it's the one in Dorset. The Dorset was more the sand pit where the Mavellan ship was.
Yeah.
But
there's one with the bits of housing, like the roof, the things that are clearly 19th century buildings.
Yeah, and with the sort of very rigidly cut or the stone formations there are just kind of cool looking. It's almost like it's man-made. I don't think it is, but it's very cool. So yeah, definitely points for that. The Movellans kind of look nuts, I gotta say. Like, I don't know if it entirely works. They're very distinctive. But I think there's a reason they're only mentioned after this episode and never really shown again. At least until the pilot, very briefly.
The pilot,
in the pilot with Capaldi and Bill. But like, my kids watch this with me. I think they kind of either laughed or were very perplexed when you first see them on screen, which is okay. Like, I think the contrast that they have this very clean ship and very clean look to the very sort of worn corridors of the Dalek city and the not so great looking Daleks kind of works, but at the same time, it's all I found them to be kind of bland, and particularly the one Movellan who sort of gets buried, and then they see her later, and we're supposed to be surprised by that because she's a robot, and obviously she wasn't really hurt.
Oh yeah, and she was a
Yeah,
famous actor in England at the time. Yeah.
yeah. I remember her name was I think Suzanne Danielle.
Yes, that's
Elaine
correct.
Nagella. And but I to be honest, because of the wigs, because of their similar look, I was like, wait, is she the same one? I can't even really remember. Like, it wasn't shocking to me because she just wasn't that distinctive. So, yeah, I mean, some of it worked, some of it didn't. My kids thought the hair. My daughter actually thought the braids looked a little mop-like, which I'm like, yeah, I guess you
Yes.
said that I couldn't unsee it. It's like
Yep.
they were just because it's so white, right? They got this white dangling braids from their heads for no real
It
reason. Like,
is.
why are you doing that as a robotic race? I guess you're obviously trying to fool people into thinking you're living beings, but
It's
yeah.
interesting, isn't it, watching it as an adult, and I guess as a kid all these years later, but also watching as an adult. I don't know if you flash back on, as I did, Don Cheadle in Boogie Nights.
Oh.
He, his character Buck in Boogie Nights is kind of constantly trying new costumes, and his costume for like New Year's Eve 1980 is basically a Movellan. It's basically that kind of style. It's like proto-Egyptian. It's like Earth, Wind, and Fire. It's it has that kind of cool 70s vibe. And he's just sort of sitting there slumped at the party, looking absolutely miserable in this costume that clearly is not working for him. So I had to go back and take a look at that. They're not actually that similar, but it's definitely in the same. There was definitely this period of the 70s where that was just a thing that kind of looked cool, and it went along with the disco vibe and, the kind of the funk and soul.
One of those cones at the end of his hand. You need like a little pink cone that lights up.
Yes, that's right. Given that his character does gets involved in a gun incident later on. I'm spoiling Boogie Nights now. I didn't think I'd be doing that on this podcast. But yeah, no, it really is. It's just looks so beautiful from costume design aspect, and they were definitely promoting the series. There are a lot of pictures you can find with them all sort of waving, the new Romana outfit, the Movellan outfit. It definitely brought in the viewers. It definitely felt Doctor Who feel like not old and creaky, even though it kind of clearly is with falling apart Daleks at this point. It's such a contrast of styles. But yeah, I wish the Movellans had more personality. I wish they weren't being played as robots.
Also, the worst design robots in the universe. I mean, I guess got to go right to it. Like the batteries, like
do it.
You slip the battery out of their belt, and it's it's okay, and they just keep doing this. And when you pull it out, like they lose power so quickly, and they start doing like essentially a ballet dance, as my daughter described it. And after the first time or two, it just becomes so comical. Like you're just kind of, oh, here comes the ballet, and they just got they start sort of twirling around, and they're playing keep away with the batteries. Again, how much humor is too much? This is too much. But it's also just makes zero logical sense. Like, I mean, why would you design yourselves with an external battery at all? Two, like if you have to have an external battery, like why not put like a little lock on there or something that makes it a little bit difficult to get that loose? And it's not even hot swappable.
Yep.
You've got zero backup power built in. Like, who designed these robots? And I got to say, like, I have to headcanon this because I do that as a
of course.
It's like, okay, well, what are the origins of the Movellans, which have never been ever explored, and no one asked for it? But here we go. I think they are intentionally designed very cheaply, very badly by some race in the distant past, and they were essentially the lowest of the low worker class robots. That it just wasn't worth investing in a new design because all they did was menial tasks. The problem is they went sentient, and because they were doing the menial tasks, they were the revolution of this society and destroyed all the people and all the other robots. And so they just, went on from there and became this big galactic force as these menial worker robots, and no one ever, because they have no creative thought, they've never thought to redesign themselves.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because they should be a lot smarter than they are. I
Right.
mean, it's unfortunate that the first sort of race of like people of color that we've seen in Doctor Who like this is kind of just a little too robotic, a little too basic. Like they're not, So the whole idea of this is like two quote unquote robot races face off against each other, and they can't break the deadlock. Which, first of all, yes, let's just acknowledge right at the start, the Daleks are not robots. They are, we've seen, they are designed to be emotional beings. Their lives are hell. They are in there, just little genetic balls of hate.
Yeah, exactly.
So
hate is the emotion that defines them.
exactly. We've seen from Clara being inside a Dalek, like no matter what emotion you try to express, it comes out as hate. So yeah, that's not the Daleks. So I don't know. And supposedly this was Douglas Adams was telling Terry Nation about an Isaac Asimov story, which feels like that. It's like a name dropping situation right there. But supposedly there was an Isaac Asimov story, but nobody's ever been able to find. Nobody knows what he was talking about two robot armies facing off against each other and being unable to do it.
And never shot fired because they're both instantly able to react to whatever move the other side makes. Yeah. Which is, I guess, a slightly interesting thought exercise. And would have been perhaps something better to explore without the Daleks, right? Because that's one of the worst things this episode does, as you've sort of identified, which is that, well, it basically demotes the Daleks to essentially a race of robots. And so many characters say it, like the Doctor, Davros himself. And it's just wrong, and unfortunately, this is a canon story, and we've had to reconcile it with various things. I will say the one good thing to come out of that is something later in Remembrance of the Daleks, where they have the Dalek battle computer, but to give it creativity, because they're very dependent on logic. This is what the Doctor says, obviously playing off this episode. They used a little girl and plug her into the battle computer, which again is this horrific, obscene thing to do, but but a very cool Doctor Who thing to do, because it makes the Daleks into these terrible baddies, and it's a visceral thing for kids watching to think they could be like captured by Daleks and plugged into a battle computer to do terrible, terrible things using their creativity, which I thought, okay, that's cool. That's a smart thing to do.
And here it just sort of devolves into a game of Rochambeau or rock, paper, scissors,
right?
Which the Doctor is trying to use to teach these robots of how introducing the random human element is how you defeat, this battle computer standoff situation, which is not true. Or rather, okay. So, time to jump into Chris's brief history corner here on the game known as Rock, Paper, Scissors or Rochambeau. Nobody knows why it's called Rochambeau, by the way. It's supposedly, Revolutionary War general was called Rochambeau, but all of the links connecting him are myth. Like it may have been a translation or a bastardization of a translation. Anyway, it goes all the way back to ancient China. To the 2nd century BC, I think is the first mention of it. It was very popular in Japan. It might have been from Japan that it kind of spread to the US. But like this game goes way back, and it is perhaps one of the best known games in the world. And we've been programming computers and robots to win Rochambeau for years. Like there was, there's been a contest for programming strategies of like, you can do this, right? It sort of makes more sense to us now in 1979 that you could sort of kind of have a computer that watches your moves, figures out your psychology and your strategy. But in 2012, Tokyo based researchers created a robot hand. This is very appropriate for this episode. A robot hand that can play rock, paper, scissors with 100% win rate against a human.
No way.
And yes, 100%. And how they do it is high-speed cameras.
Yeah, I figured there would be something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this has always been a thing at the back of my mind with rock, paper, scissors, is like, it's a weird game because, like, if you just slightly delay your decision, you know, as you're doing the thing with your fist and you pound, if you watch your opponent, like, you could see if they're going into a scissors kind of formation or a paper formation or a rock. Like, you can kind of tell, like, if your brain is fast enough. But yeah, that is
if you're the Flash, you always win.
Exactly.
Computers are the Flash because they can always, you know, their time is much more compressed. And this is exactly what I sort of thought in the two Movellans when they start playing the game against each other and they always tie. That was my brain going exactly like, this is actually not even this time. The first time I watched it, I was thinking that they're robots and they're just reacting to the micro movements of the other person and they just keep coming out the same thing. And, you know, it's always a tie. But if that's the case, the Doctor should always lose. Organic should always lose against them.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not it's such a, you know, victory for human randomness and logic as it seems. Yeah, of course robots would be able to see out of time. And, okay, maybe we didn't know that in 1979, that we'd had robots with advanced cameras, that'd be able to slow it down. Fair enough. But also, other programs have discovered that being truly random, simulating randomness, which is entirely appropriate for this show. This very show is the only Doctor Who podcast that can talk about this with any sort of authority because we have atmospheric randomness every week. We know that a computer could use random.org. You know, certainly the Movellans could have had more than enough atmosphere to use it. Yeah, so, you know, they should have been undefeated against the Doctor for that reason, because if you are truly random in rock, paper, scissors, that is the only way to avoid complete defeat. Yeah, you know, because you don't have any sort of pattern of behavior to fall back on, whereas humans do. Humans are more likely. There have been studies about this even in the 2010s. Like, humans are more likely to choose, like, if they've lost 2 games of rock, paper, scissors in a row, they're more likely to switch to another thing. Like, there's all of these rules that you can tell about human behavior. It's actually our brains that are the weak ones in this game.
Yeah, it's a bad, you know, it's a bad analogy you picked there, Doctor. So it doesn't really work. It's sort of like the point they're trying to make. You get it, but I do think the better scene that explores this is at the end, where the Doctor does the elephant logic with Nellie's an elephant, elephants are pink, and the Davros kind of agrees with him. But then it's like, you know what a human would say to that? Well, elephants aren't pink. And in other words, you need to go beyond the rules. You have to think out of the box. And that's the way to sort of defeat these ultra logical things. It's not to literally beat them at chess, because they get more advanced enough. They'll always beat you. It's that you got to start playing some other game to win this game, which, you know, computers confined to the box that they're in would never be able to do. So in the rock, paper, scissors thing, like, you almost want him to, like, either smack his arm off, which Ramana does later. So yeah, I won. No, not you. Like that's a way to win. Or you could sort of lose the game, but then just keep insisting that you won. What's he going to do? Like, you have to do sort of things like that to mess with them. And, you know, here they're trying to sort of say, oh, computers are just bad at things, which, you know, again, 79, you could forgive it. But
yeah. Also, we hadn't yet discovered pink elephants. I mean, that's no, of course we haven't yet. But there's the point, in an infinite universe, of course, there are going to be pink elephants, and Doctor's probably encountered pink elephants on his journey. So that was kind of a bad analogy in itself. You know, Davros has probably seen pink elephants. Poor guy.
When he was a kid, I'm sure he was coloring them in his, college coloring books. Speaking of that, hey, isn't anyone ever going to ask what happened to the Thals? Is anyone ever going to ask that? Because the Daleks left. Like, I'm not going to go into a whole history of the Daleks here. I mean, they left Scaro for a while, fine. They come back, fine. So is it canon that the Thals ever left? I mean, the last mention of the Thals, I don't know if it's mentioned, but the last time we see the Thals is Genesis of the Daleks in the entire series. And I believe they are either mentioned once more, or they're probably mentioned here and there. I know they're sort of referred to obliquely, obviously, whenever you talk about the war that the Daleks were born out of, the Thals sort of come up indirectly. But like outside of Big Finish or novels or comics or whatever, like the Thals are just, whatever. Maybe they were just all dead or they left. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, well, we know that the Thal city was destroyed by Davros's missile in Genesis. And
we know they return though in Planet of the Daleks. There's a whole Thal expedition.
Okay.
After Genesis, clearly, and the Thals certainly survive because the Daleks, the original episode, presumably comes after Genesis, right? So that's where the Thals were. From.
Yes, but and then there's that whole thing with Khaleds versus whatever Terry Nation. What did he originally call the race that? Yes, has that been retroactively explained how the name changed?
Kind of. I mean, there's a few different interpretations. One is simply that that it's another name for Khaleds. Another is that we're talking about two different wars, which is to say the 1,000-Year War with the Khaleds and the Thals, but there's also a neutronic war that's referred to that's over in 5 minutes. So there's a neutronic war later between the Dals and the Thals that is really quick. That's just like, a nuclear exchange. So that's another way they explain it. I think there's probably some other sort of more nuanced ways to explain it. But yeah, those are the two main buckets and where you sort of fall in doll lore.
Okay. All right. So we do get a Dalek mutant here, just randomly crawling out of the wasteland. Do we? Is that what it is?
It's just Putty. He's looking at Putty. He says, "Oh, it's a Khaled mutant," and it's like, "Oh my god, really?" And I guess this seems almost like someone saw Douglas Adams' script and said you have to put in something about how they used to be organic because they're not really robots. And he kind of threw this in, and then they just took whatever was in the bin. Like someone's, I don't know, like slime that their kids threw away. Like they just decided, all right, this is what we're going to use. Hey.
Douglas. I mean, we can't blame him too much. He's about to give us City of Death, right? His his masterpiece, and it really is like he is bringing almost a new Who sensibility to Doctor Who, like years ahead of its time. It's very Moffat-y. His dialogue, the snappiness of it, right? It does very much resonate with Moffat. But it gets back to something that we've talked about on the show before, especially with Chibnall, in the context of Chibnall sort of changing what's gone before, that Doctor Who works best. You can be humorous with it. You can have a lot of fun with it, as long as you are being yes and. As long as you're building on what's gone before and not kind of wiping over what's gone before. And it is kind of interesting that Douglas Adams gets this done to him, right? Because of the scene where the Doctor is trapped and he starts reading a book by Ulan Kalufid, which such a Hitchhiker's throwback. I had memorized like the opening part of Hitchhikers where they talk about Ulan Kalufid's, trilogy, best-selling trilogy of books, Where God Went Wrong, some more of God's greatest mistakes, and who is this God person anyway? I remember as a kid trying to actually fill out in my head how you would pad out those 3 books from the titles. That's how, like, kid like I was in my head, like taking it seriously. Oh, these are real books. So he's reading Ulan Kalufid's, what is it, The Beginning of the Universe is the title or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and he says, gets it wrong on the first page. Why didn't he ask someone who was there? Well, along comes Terminus several years later to not really yes and Douglas Adams, to no but him. With its fuel leaking from a time ship theory. Right. So maybe Ulan Kalufid got it right after all.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder. Well, here's the thing: the doctor says, "Why didn't he ask someone who was there?" He doesn't say he was there.
No.
So maybe he just knows a guy. So, like, in other words, because you can't really reconcile this with like the doctor lies because there's nobody there when he's reading, so there's no one for him
Mm.
to lie to. So maybe a guy told him what it was, but that guy was wrong. That guy didn't know about Terminus. He was just making something up.
Maybe that guy was wearing some celery on his jacket and cricketing pants, and the Tom Baker doctor never recognized him.
There you go. Maybe there was a Davison Baker crossover that we don't know about. Maybe it was a big
Yes. Lost to history. Yeah, they could still do it. Exactly. While they're both
Absolutely.
still alive, write it in.
So let's zero in a little bit on the big baddie here, which of course is Davros.
Yeah.
And I have to ask you, Chris,
Mhm.
how did it feel seeing that scene again, where
Uh,
Davros comes alive, the light comes on,
hmm.
and there's the cliffhanger. And well, how was the cliffhanger for you?
The cliffhanger. So I should say, as Pete knows, this was my first hiding behind the sofa moment. That particular cliffhanger. And it's one of those moments of television that I remember so clearly. I mean, of course, you never remembered it exactly, right? In my head, what happened was the Doctor and Romana and a bunch of people sort of pass through a room that has Davros in it. And it's almost like they are seeing him like he's in a museum. And in my head, there was this sort of sense of like they're passing through, and here's Davros. And don't worry, it's safe. He's totally dead. Then the light blinks on. Now, it's not actually that when you watch it again, right? The hand moves first. He does his talons of Wen Chiang thing, which is happening a lot. It also happens with the Movellan who gets trapped in this story. And, it kind of that does that whole thing with it. But it's still scary. It still brings me back to that because as much as this Davros mask is like, we know as fans, this is the same as the Michael Wisher mask from Genesis.
Right.
But like the new actor doesn't fit in it properly. Like they had to cut the bottom off. Like it was so trashed that apparently a cleaner threw it away. None of that mattered to me at the time, and I can barely even see it now because I just see the scariness of it, of how it was lit. I think that's not a lot of. It doesn't get a lot of mention in discussion of Destiny of the Daleks. How sort of moodily lit the whole thing is down there, and those dark scenes. So yeah, it still got me. It still gets me. I didn't hide behind the sofa, but yeah, how can you get more cliffhangery than the light on his head coming on? My God. My God. Did your kids react to that one?
Yeah, they thought it was fine. I'll definitely say like it's probably better than you remember. I mean, there's Michael Wisher as Davros. There's Terry Molloy who plays him after this. Obviously, the new series. David Gooderson isn't really thought of that much as a Davros, but his performance is fine. It's too bad he's really impeded by that mask because I got to say, when you watch it on Blu-ray, which I did, you really do see more than you should. And again, you always have to correct, right? Like Doctor Who for the longest time was always made to be seen once and not seen again. Even by this point, I think in 79, they were starting to realize it was a franchise. They were starting to realize that maybe we shouldn't be destroying all our old tapes by this point. But, there was not, the VCRs weren't super common yet. So, there wasn't really a lot of mind paid to it. So it's unfortunate. I think he's kind of done in a bit by the sets at the story and the mask, but he and the Doctor when they're on screen together, I think work really well, and that's a key part of any Doctor Davros story. They need to have good scenes together. They need to have at least a couple of moments where they talk to each other as scientists. And I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit to part of my evil plot succeeding bits, but there's a bit where the Dalek, why don't they just kill the Doctor at the end? Like he's there and he's gonna like, well, I'll blow it up for you, and the Dalek's like, do not move, and they're keeping him prisoner, and it's like, well, why don't you kill him? Like zap, he's right there. The Doctor's right there. He's your enemy. Just kill him right now.
Yeah.
I think it's because my explanation the Davros kind of likes the Doctor. He likes having him around, and the thought of going back to the Dalek battle fleet or wherever their base is now, and literally only having Daleks to talk to would drive anyone nuts, like Davros, like, he obviously respects the Doctor as an equal or near equal to his own. I think there's a line somewhere in the canon where it's like that. And he's like, I'm going to keep the Doctor around just to chat with.
It is interesting, isn't it, coming to this after a Master story, because there is definitely a lot of overlap between Davros and the Master in the way that they treat the Doctor as this intellectual sparring partner. Just to close the loop on the mask, I will say that I never again, like from Davison era onwards, never again really liked the Davros mask. Like where he goes sort of like a sickly yellow from now on, and like you can really see that his eyes are kind of, just missing. Whereas with this version of the mask, like his eyes are sort of, it's like a statue having eyes, like it just this kind of creepy, dark, unblinking, shadowy things. And that was much scarier to me, and I've never liked how Davros has looked since.
Yeah, the curves got a little softer, and I think the main point is that you brought up once or twice, like the lighting here is just dead on. You kind of want Davros a little bit backlit. You want those eyebrow ridges to kind of be, a bit crisper, so you get those shadows in the eyes. Yeah, I do like Terry Mullo's performance as Davros later on, but I think the mask, it just looks a little too clown-like, to be honest.
Yeah,
I would definitely agree with you.
And having it in chiaroscuro really makes that light pop when it comes on, and I think that's part of the success of it, and the way that it sort of looks like headphones around his head. And I don't know. I mean, we all kind of default to what was scary to us as kids. So I may be, as with all of this, I am somewhat biased in Destiny of the Daleks' favor. But yeah, this is prime Davros in many ways.
As bad as the mask is, it's kind of, at least it's not as bad as the Daleks themselves, I have to say, because these are probably the crappiest looking Daleks of the entire original series run. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking of. I don't think so, because they've got, it's been on record. So one of the things about this story that I didn't know until I did the research, it's the first Doctor Who story, one of the first BBC productions, I'm told, to use a Steadicam.
Yes.
And as everybody knows, who pays any attention to how Hollywood films are made, like the Steadicam was a key innovation. It basically lets you do sweeping shots with a smooth camera shot. Obviously, image stabilization was not a thing back then, so you really needed booms and stuff like that to do it for you. And because it was a new thing then, like it was super duper expensive. Yep. And so they paid for it, and then they had no money. And even though Doctor Who always has no money, they really had no money. They could not build new Dalek props, so they had to dig them out of the BBC warehouse, and they were not in good shape. And it shows. There's only 3 or 4 that are really working. They're being adjusted sometimes on screen. There's a few bits if you catch them. Luckily, I didn't the first time, but there's definitely some scenes later on. It's really unfortunate. Like some of the slats are broken, and they didn't sort of do some clever angles to hide it. No, it's very clear these are not the Daleks at their best, and it's just kind of sad to watch it now.
Yeah, and they break through that so the black mirror metal thing at the end of episode that doesn't quite work. You can sort of imagine that was supposed to be a better reveal than it was, and then one of the Dalek has like a bit of black plastic hanging around on its eye stalk for like the next episode while they're interrogating Ramana, which is a bit sort of problematic. The Daleks defeated by a little bit of plastic. Yeah, I mean, you may have to go back to Power of the Daleks and their cardboard cutout Daleks to kind of find anything that's bad. It's pretty bad, and they're kind of diminished in so many ways, in part by the Doctor saying, hey, you can't get up the shaft, taunting them about that, and then also by just defeating them by throwing his hat over an eye stalk, which...
Good God, yeah.
Yes. Iconic, but diminishes the Daleks and their threat in this overall story.
Yeah, I got to say, liked. I don't know if this was a conscious rebuttal of that scene.
Mm.
Probably a rebuttal of some other scenes, but I think about sometimes the cliffhanger of. I think it's the cliffhanger of the Stolen Earth, where Wilf fires a pink gun at a Dalek eye stalk,
Yes.
and it just uses some kind of vaporization, like it heats up or whatever, and it just dissipates instantly. And the Dalek even goes out his way to say, "My vision is not impaired."
Hmm.
And you kind of like you feel like it's a correction for this scene because it's literally like, your eye stalk kind of moves, like just move it up and down real quick to shake that hat off. Like, can't you do that? And yeah, it's just so silly. I mean, come on.
If only the Time Lords had thought of this, or maybe the Time Lords were kind of like, this is why they thought the Time War was a good idea. It's like, no problem, we'll just put hats over their eye stalks. It's all good. See, the Doctor could do it.
Yeah, if I have to headcanon this, I don't think we have to, but if you wanted to, you could say like, there's another thing that doesn't make sense in the script, which is that the Dalek ship, the nearest one apparently, is 6 hours away. And you make it see, well, wait a minute, didn't these Daleks come on a ship? Like, they're not native here. Where's their ship? They were just dropped off?
Yeah, they got a lift.
So, and if you get the sense that if the Daleks are saying, "Hey, yeah, we're on a mission from the Supreme Dalek," maybe they're just talking a big game, and these are
Yeah.
like the crappiest Daleks in the fleet. And they basically, one of them came up with the idea, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't we go back to Scaro and see if Davros is still alive? And if he is, he could help us." And they're like, and nobody thinks this is going to work. Like the Supreme Dalek's just like, this is ridiculous. We're not wasting any valuable resources, but we have these like, dozen or so maintenance Daleks who are just losers that are the worst in the fleet that we weren't even going to repair because they're so bad. Why don't we just send that group on this super long shot that Davros might still be alive, and then if they get it, great, we'll send a ship. If not, we'll probably never hear from them again.
Or maybe, I'm thinking, just as you're saying this, maybe they're like just not even Daleks. Maybe they're Dalek cosplayers inside these things, which might explain the robot thing. And maybe we should have had a moment where the Daleks get blown up by the explosives at the end. Like, you see inside, they're like just a couple of, a couple of Dalek fans in there, like, well, this plan really messed up. They're just not scary. They're not threatening, and it ultimately, this story commits one of the greatest sins, despite all the comedy in it. The Doctor Who can commit, which just gets boring. It's just like you're not really following the story. You're not invested. Certainly, as an adult, as a kid, I think you're kind of accepting everything and looking at the fever dream of it. Like, this is. I will always go back to that. Like with Destiny of the Daleks, it like is so tied into everything else that was going on in 1979. Blake 7 on TV. I even thought I saw a little bit of the computer Aurak from Blake 7. I thought was used as a
like
prop.
in the background of the
the Dalek control room. It looks very, very similar. I haven't been able to find any indication that it is the same prop, but it certainly looks like that. And it's of a piece of this idea that like Hitchhikers and Blake 7 and Star Wars was on BBC Radio at the like it was all just kind of wonderful new science fiction mush kind of all together, and this is at the epicenter of it, so I can't hate on it too much for that reason.
No, you can, and like you say, I mean, the ratings sort of almost speak for themselves. I mean, people were to your point, like there wasn't, you have to put yourself in that time. We did not there was an excitement around this genre, but there wasn't the infinite supply that we have today of just whatever you want. And seeing the Daleks again on TV, what a thrill.
After 4 years.
In a new adventure. And I will say, I've just hated on the Daleks there a bit, but I will say one of the better scenes is when they exterminate the prisoners. Even though the prisoners are not very good, it's a good scene for them to do what Daleks should be doing, which is indiscriminate killing and doing it in the Doctor's face. And that's one of the better bits of dialogue, even though it's the Doctor and a Dalek. The Daleks are just like, hey, we're taking no responsibility for this. We're just going to start offing people. And this is, again, very good testament to Baker and how he understood the show. Like, this is one of those moments he has to take it seriously, and he does. And they're the Daleks and the Doctor are just screaming at each other. It's like, we're just going to keep killing people. No, one more killing, I'm going to kill Davros. Oh, you're not going to do that. You try it. And he's like, oh, I will. And you actually believe him. He's going to do it. And Davros, of course, rightly believes him. And he's just like, no. This is getting out of hand. Like, just agree to what he says. So that scene I thought was actually very, very good. What
did you think about the Nova device stuff? The Ramana in the tube. I mean, that's one of those indelible images for me, and it really looks like a music video almost, like she's performing inside that tube. And as a fan now, you might look at that and say, well, why not just pick up a rock and break that tube? But again, that sort of brings us back to these fever dream aspects. But yeah,
I mean, I think you could presume it's something much stronger than plexiglass. Like, the rock's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
No, I never thought that was a solution. I think it's fine. I mean, it is sort of one of those images that you get in your head. Like, it is cool, right? Like, you have this sort of piece of technology in the middle of a quarry, and the threat is, very clear. I will say the Movellans aren't very good at safety. I feel like I think it's you would want maybe a couple of layers to make sure this is really controlled. That said, they're robots, so they're not worried about the atmosphere being destroyed. It won't affect them. But I would think that much discharge, like, because to take up it being flammable, would have some effect on everything. It sounds like it's kind of blowing up the planet in a no, it's a great image, and I'm all for it. The tubes and being like that claustrophobic feeling of it either being filled with gas or water. That's
the thing. You didn't even need it to be. You didn't even need the Nova device in this. It's an extraneous thing. One that you might sort of find in a Moffat script. Like, oh, you've gone a bit too. You've thrown in one thing too many for this, Stephen. It definitely has that feel to it. Old Who could do that too. And you all you needed there was Romana, out there as a trap to lure the Doctor.
You kind of want what that. I guess what I would say that scene's missing is having her unconscious. You kind of want that desperate moment of two people who mean so much to each other looking at each other through the glass, and the person who is not able to save the other person to be just in sheer anguish, like, so it doesn't have that level of drama that you would get with, like, whether it's Star Trek 2 or
I was going to say Wrath of Khan,
or like
could
the
have one of
Abyss
those
even,
moments.
right? Like, those kind of scenes can be really dramatic, but they can also be a little bit like traumatizing. Like, if you think about the Abyss, I don't know if you're talking about when Ed Harris has the helmet on, and I think it's Mary Elizabeth Mastertonio has to drown in front of him.
I don't know that one, but you've got me thinking of Lost, though. You got me thinking that Romana should have just put a hand up against the edge of the glass there, and just have it written "Not Penny's boat" on her hand. Little Lost shout out for all your fans.
Not Movellan living beings, not. Movellans are robots.
Yes. Oh, but then you'd have to kill Romana off at that point, which would be unfortunate. No City of Death.
Romana.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, there's some questions we need to answer about this episode to find out what we know about it and certain situations around it. Those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. The first question, as ever, why did the randomizer take us here?
Wow. Well, I've got so many reasons written down for this. First of all, it is the first story with the randomizer large and in charge. The first story, the TARDIS is basically on shuffle, and it throws out what it thinks is a banger. It's like, how about going back to Scaro, Doctor? Yeah, let's take it back to 1975 with some smooth Scaro tunes. And of course, it isn't a banger. But, the randomizer would love this for 2 reasons. First of all, randomizer destination. Secondly, the randomizer is bound to love Rochambeau if it's a game that you can win by being random. By being truly random, you can avoid defeat. It also wants to show us up because of the missing codex scandal, the fact that this was not in our original codex. Sorry, randomizer. Okay, you got us.
The randomizer sounds a little narcissistic on this one.
It really does. It's gone a little Tom Baker. But also, here are two connections to the Mind of Evil, particularly. The Nova device. This idea of just like as we noted with Pertwee last week, and then the missile last week, and then the missiles and dinosaur in the spaceship. The Doctor just likes blowing stuff up. The Doctor likes it when things go boom. The Nova device would have been the ultimate, blowing stuff up on Scaro. Unfortunately, it was never utilized. But anyway, little pyromania there, potential pyromania.
You're reminding me of Planet of the Giants. That's the other one where he was seeing things go boom. Yeah, and the Romans,
just like setting stuff on fire, which is like why he liked hanging out with Ace. But yeah, the Steadicam in this is sort of the equivalent of the helicopter in the Mind of Evil in terms of a thing that you spent too much money on, so you've got no budget left for the rest of the entire show. And what was the point? Did you really need that Steadicam? Did you really need that helicopter?
No, I couldn't even tell when it was used, to be honest with you. Could you?
Yeah. No. This is, JNT is, of course, on the production at this point, kind of looking at this and being like, oh, I can just spend money on anything. I can make up any reason to have a thing on a show. I see how this works. Plus, here's a thing we did not mention in the Mind of Evil. We did not mention the fact that one of the Doctor's hearts stops.
Oh, that's right.
Right? And the Master's frantically trying to bring him back to life.
With the most naff CPR, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Smacking his chest lightly while he's sitting in the chair. It's like, okay. I
guess, yeah.
You know what Gallifrey and medical science is like, but that's not going to cut it here for a human.
Yes, why were you not humming Staying Alive, Master? Oh, that's right, because it hadn't come out yet. Yes, but no, so I think that the fact that Romana is able to stop one of her hearts not only shows that she's better than the Doctor, who, as far as we know, has never done this, but also
learned it in school.
She learned it in school. Like, she is so clearly ahead of the Doctor in her schooling.
Well,
we saw that in State of Decay as well, right?
What are they teaching? Gallifrey's teaching, like, faking your death? School? I mean, all right, okay.
Yeah, here's what to do, kids. If you ever have to do manual labor, fake your own death immediately.
Should check that curriculum in my son's middle school.
But so I'm wondering if there's some reason that we're going to discover that the randomizer is like trying to alert us to hearts stopping. Maybe it's something about the 60th anniversary that the randomizer has sort of been preparing us for this year in lots of different ways. So watch this space for more heart-stopping action, literally.
Oh my, I might have a theory on that for when we have to spin up the randomizer. Mm-hmm. But anyway, in terms of why it brought us here, I caught all that. I think the randomizer journey, it's the first one. But similar to the Mind of Evil, I figured that the bad guys here are just not really thought through. Well, they're pretty confused. They don't really make a lot of sense. There's, all the contradictory stuff about the robots and the Daleks. And so, I mean, it's just kind of like not exactly the finest hour for the bad guys in this one and that one.
No, for sure. But, at least the Movellans didn't turn into bad dragons, bad dragon costumes. So.
No one threw an egg on them right at the end. So.
Yes.
All right, moving on to the second question. What if the evil plot had succeeded?
Okay, so the main thing, I wrote a shruggy down here for this because my only answer is would the Doctor and Davros just be forced at gunpoint basically to play rock paper scissors the entire length of the Dalek Movellan War?
Yeah, I guess. So
Not entirely clear. What do you think?
well, I guess there's two evil plots because we have two
Mhm.
spacefaring evil races, right? So
Right.
you have to imagine um either they do kill the doctor at the end there, so the
Hmm.
Daleks don't get blown up and they essentially win because they've blown up the Movellans ship.
Right.
So now Davros is back. He can reprogram their computers. The Daleks become a bigger threat. The Time Lore happens earlier, and perhaps the Daleks even win it. So it's
And the
you know,
Doctor is just dead. The Doctor doesn't even get to be Peter Davison.
right. He's just exterminated. Maybe
Mm.
maybe he does, and maybe the Davros just keeps him prisoner. Um, and so
But you know
he's
what?
like a chatty
On the
Cathy with Davros. That's about it. That's all he has to do.
Davros would certainly love that. But yeah, so it would also, like, if the Doctor is killed at any point before he becomes Peter Davison, Adric is still alive.
Oh,
Yeah, and I guess the dinosaurs are still alive. Yeah, you get
okay.
started into this very interesting timey-wimey stuff. Way more dinosaurs and
Maybe the
spaceships.
Silurians are still alive. Maybe it's like the Silurian Empire goes out into the stars.
Yeah.
So the other one, though, of course, is that the Movellans win. So here's where I would think maybe because it's a really bad assault when
Mm.
the slaves try to take over the Movellan ship, and I mean both Dalek and Movellan security they need to get fired
Yeah,
for
basically.
allowing all these penetrations of their base, but you have to assume that doesn't go well. The Movellans win, and they kill the slaves. They manage to repel the Daleks, possibly capture Davros or kill him, and then take the Doctor away with them because their plan was to have the Doctor reprogram their battle fleet.
Mm.
And so then the Movellans win the war with the
Yeah.
Daleks.
So it's a Movellan Time Lord Time War.
Yeah. So then there you go. So then what happens? Like the Movellans really are this amazing space power. Maybe they end up being these replacement Daleks. And are they better? Are they worse? I don't know.
We don't know, yeah.
Tune into that big finish that yet again. No one asked for. Movellans
the
aren't in charge.
the Morellans fill the universe with disco. The only man who can stop them, Dr. Disco.
Oh, boom. There it is. More disco.
And speaking of Dr. Disco's companion,
the one Clara Oswald splintered into time at the end of The Name of the Doctor. She is intersecting with all the Doctor's lives and all of his adventures, ensuring that, of course, all of his victories stay victories. So, what is she doing here in Destiny of the Daleks? What do you think?
where is the Clara Splinter? We have to officially say the question.
Oh, yes, I'm
So
sorry.
that we can...
Where is the Clara Splinter?
So I had a moment of revelation on this last night as I was making notes. I was like, oh my God, could this explain the Romana regeneration? That all of those other Romanas aren't actually Romana, they are Clara or some version of Clara who is, either able to shapeshift or like she's actually doesn't look like Clara in all her incarnations. And there's one very tall one and one very operatic one who's just on hand. And one, yeah. And
Okay.
that's,
It's expanding our canon of Clara.
yeah. Well, that would certainly, like, you can sort of imagine behind the scenes, like Romana just one day, no muss, no fuss, the Maritime Romana has decided to regenerate. By the way, we should briefly mention why Maritime was not invited back. She was pregnant at the time, but she said that she also just wasn't asked to participate. Guess they just didn't think that a Lady Time Lord needed that same level of, actually swapping the faces to be seen, or she wanted to do it in the privacy of her own chamber. So she's already regenerated. She's just like, I know that the Doctor's not going to accept this.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, random ladies wandering around the corridors of the TARDIS, can you help me here? Let's put together a little scam.
Interesting. So basically, this is a secret Ramana has been keeping ever since this episode. That's interesting. And it was not, she was just goofing around with the Doctor on this whole body swap thing. Okay.
It could be, yeah. Those could be Claras. That would definitely retroactively, if we're using Clara as a plot device to tie up any plot holes, this is a huge one. She can be used for that. But yeah, what else?
Well, mine was more minor. I think she's basically running the radiation pill dispensary just off screen for the slave workers because, they're apparently fine all at the end, and they've been treated, and it's all good, and somehow they've been working in the rubble there for a long time without dying of radiation sickness. So someone's got to be giving them something.
Yeah. There's just a candy striper coming in from our screen, and it's Clara Oswald. She's got a little nurse uniform on.
Yeah, and the Daleks don't mind because it's like, well, if she could keep these people working longer, then that's cool. So boom.
Yep. And it's actually not just anti-radiation pills. She's actually just drugging the prisoners so that they are barely even worried when they die, or like have a very kind of low level activity level when they try to take over the Movellans ship.
Yeah, even
that would certainly explain a little bit.
Rocks.
Exactly. Oh, Clara, what are you doing?
All right. It's time for the final question, the only question, the question we must answer about Destiny of the Daleks. What do we think of this episode? The Pull to Open rating system, of course, has 4 ratings. There is the Dalek, aptly for a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which is for a not so good episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which is a not so good episode, but hey, at least we learned something. Maybe this is an example of how not to do Doctor Who. And of course, the Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best stories of Doctor Who. How about I go first this time? Because
you go first.
Meaningful story for you.
Yeah,
I think it's probably. I'll just go. I have to just say it's an Ogron. It's unfortunate. It's an Ogron. Didn't have to be, but it's the confused writing. We had talked about the whole thing with Nation and Adams. While there's some decent stuff in here, it just adds up to something that's less than the sum of its parts when you add in all the cheapness of it, right? Like there's too much headcanon to explain things away. Some of the stuff you don't even want to sort of explain away. It's just you're just kind of like, it should have been better, guys. I wish I could have gone a little more, little higher. I don't think it's quite a hater. Maybe it's a hater. I think they should have known better, though. This is the problem, like particularly the Daleks themselves.
They should have. I was thinking of giving this a hater rating for a while. But I was also thinking of something we've mentioned on the show before, which is, and I've been sort of struggling to articulate this, which is that we need a rating for when a Doctor Who story is just so nostalgic for you that you just don't have any chill. You can't judge it. You cannot stand a judgment. I mean, I could sit here and tell you that this is a Professor hater, but I can't hate on this. I cannot hate on Destiny of the Daleks in any way. I can't tell you it's an Ogron. I certainly can't pretend it's a Dalek. And even though Viscount Banger's daughter is in it, in a lead role for the first time, I cannot give it a Viscount Banger. Sorry, Viscount Banger. The story, it just sort of is. And that plus this sort of sense of like we need a rating for nostalgia led me to think like we need on Pull to Open, and we should only use this very sparingly. This is like our bee stinger, maybe use it once in the entire run of Pull to Open, or maybe use it once a year, once every 100 episodes. But I'm fully prepared to give you one of these, Pete. And here's what I suggest we call it: a fixed point in time.
Fixed point in time.
A fixed point in time. It just is. It's just there. Destiny of the Daleks just is. It is fixed. It's immutable. It's certain, and it is immune to judgment. Judgment just slides off it for me. So it's sort of like saying it's a pass, but I also like this idea of a fixed point in time. It made me think of River Song, at the beginning of the wedding of River Song, where she just can't shoot the Doctor. Right? She just can't do it, even though it is a fixed point in time. And then the universe reacts to that. Now, hopefully the randomizer is not now going to give us every story at once. because I've kind of broken this fixed point in time. But I have that moment of like I'm standing in front of Destiny of the Daleks in an astronaut suit, and you are asking me to point the gun. You're asking me to shoot Destiny of the Daleks. I cannot do it. It is so a piece of my childhood. It inspired my first fanfic. I just connected to everything else that was going on in 1979, from like Faulty Towers to The Jam to 2000 AD, the comic. Like, it was all the cultural milieu that formed me at a very young age. So yeah, I cannot touch it. Can't shoot it. I'm so sorry. It's a fixed point in time for me.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah.
We have a new rating. We have a new rating for our rating system, the 5th rating.
But a very, very sparingly used rating, only in extremis, or even for extremis, if you like. Can you use this? I mean, Pete, what was your first Doctor Who story? Do you remember? It was Davison.
Mordred Undead. We've done it.
Mordred Undead. We've done it. Do you think you would retroactively want to give that a fixed point in time? Like, we can't. Because we kind of like Mordred Undead anyway, right?
Like, I guess a Dalek. I mean, it was good. It was a good little time travel story. But I get what you mean. Yeah. Like, there are definitely episodes that I won't reveal here that I don't think are defensible on many bases, various. So they're just not good.
Yeah,
and yet I find them very watchable, and I find them like this is they can be good. So we'll get to those when we get to them. It's funny when you were talking there about the Lake Silencio imagery of someone asking you to shoot. For some reason, I went to that Hugh Grant movie with Julia Roberts, Notting Hill, where she's all like a girl standing in front of someone asking you to love her to love you, and it's like Destiny of the Daleks is standing in front of you asking you to love it.
Yes.
And the two of you will be very happy together, I think.
We will, yeah. I mean, even though it's this weird thing of sort of like it's simultaneously boring and wrong and bad, but also like visually, I can't get away from its iconography.
Yeah. No, I get that. All right. Wow. What a landmark episode in the Pull to Open canon.
Seriously.
Closing the book on Destiny of the Daleks, but with a new rating system or an enhanced rating system. And eyes forward onto where the randomizer will take us next. And that's what we're going to figure out now.
Right. So the randomizer, 2 parts. Pete has the codex in front of him. That is a spreadsheet of every Doctor Who story arranged by the way that we've arranged it. Like, we can talk about this again in the future, the way that we've, said that Extremis is its own story, Mission to the Unknown isn't, a lot of judgment calls like that. But then I have the Executor, which is random.org, which we've already mentioned uses atmospheric noise to produce true randomness, not algorithmic randomness. Random.org will win Rochambeau against you all day long. If you were to hook it up to that. I ran out of time for this, but I really want to see if ChatGPT can play rock, paper, scissors, and whether it would beat me. But maybe I'll do that by next week and report back.
I would just say don't give it access to your webcam, and then I think you'll have a better shot.
Yes, I'm just going to do it below the screen. Yep, You can't even see it. All right, so you are going to give me the number of stories, Doctor Who stories that we have remaining. I will plug that into random.org, and then we'll give the randomizer some challenges before I hit the generate button.
Sounds good. Okay, so the codex, per the codex and per the update I just gave it for Destiny of the Daleks, we now have 227 Doctor Who stories that we have not talked about on this podcast.
227. The number is fading down fast. It's clicking down on an old LCD digital watch screen. And we're down there. Okay, Pete, do you have a challenge for the randomizer?
I sort of remember I had one earlier when I was talking about it, and now I've completely forgotten what it is.
I'll give you my challenge then. Give you a chance to think about it, which is that I want to find out what your fixed points in time are. So I'm going to say randomizer. You know, in your infinite random wisdom, you know what stories Peter is holding in his head when he's thinking about his own fixed points in time, his own stories he cannot shoot by the shores of Lake Silencio. So take us to one of those, whatever that is.
All right, that's pretty good. I gotta say, I think we're not even close to Quarry Bingo. I'd want to start filling that in. So let's do some serious quarry action. This was really high bar for quarries. This one, so
lots of quarry in this. But you're saying you want a story where the amount of time spent in a quarry is even higher.
I want maximum quarry as high as you can possibly give it. And I know that this is confined. Basically make it. I'm going to give us classic, right? It's going to be classic series because that
it got to be.
Fewer quarries later, and we already did Waters of Mars. So, yeah, quarry us up.
There's also the option, like, we're pretty close to a Scaro bingo. A Scaro in the classic series bingo. Right? Because it's never seen again after Destiny. So, obviously, we have the Daleks itself. And is it Day that goes there? In the Pertwee area?
Evil of the Daleks.
Evil, okay. So we've got Evil and we've got the mutants / the Daleks, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, we're close. We could have a Scaro in the old series bingo, and maybe if we do Magician's Apprentice, Sorcerer's Apprentice, Magician's Familiar, Witch's Familiar. God, I can't even remember that title. Then we might... Yeah, we might have it overall. That would definitely be an interesting one to go to with the whole Davros chair thing.
Beginning of Asylum is on Scaro too.
Yes, yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Alrighty, let's spin this baby up.
All right, give me the countdown. We'll get a random number.
4, 3, 2, 1.
220. Oh my God, we've gone fast forward again. We're in Whitaker again.
Yep. Orphan 55.
Oh God. We've got some quarry. I'm pretty sure this is quarry. This is one of the earliest.
I was certain the randomizer would take us to some classic series thing.
It's funny. Orphan 55 went through my head when you were saying that you wanted quarry.
Really?
Yeah, and it just because it isn't right, but it's got that sort of windswept outdoor
look, sure.
Yeah. Oh God,
Dominators or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
But no, and I'm guessing, Pete, this is not Orphan 55 is not going to be a fixed point in time for you.
That's fair to say. So no, you've been ignored, at least for now. But guys, we will not be ignoring you, of course, because we are looking forward to all of your comments and how you rated this episode. What did you think of Destiny of the Daleks, especially if you are on Spotify? Please go there and rate it. Because we're a podcast, and you can find us on podcast apps like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Great place to leave a review and rating, by the way, or any other podcast app that you happen to use, whether it's Overcast, the cast in a spell. I don't know. There's a lot of podcast apps, but whatever you have, we're there. Please share the podcast with a friend. That's absolutely the best thing you can do outside of leaving a review. Follow us on social at Pull to Open on TikTok and Pull to Open 63 on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks very much to Martin West for our music, and to everyone who leaves us great comments on all of our socials. Don't forget youtube.com/Pull to Open. Also a great place to follow us and leave comments.
Please see if you can stump us with your emoji titles, because as you've seen this episode, there's definitely very doable. And hopefully we'll be able to reveal that mysterious 42 episode title next week on Pull to Open.
All right, folks. Catch you later.